100 Years of Secrets. Tesla's banned vision of the afterlife is finally unleashed. They hid his final interview, terrified of what he knew. Did Tesla discover that death is just a frequency shift? That your soul's energy never dies, but transforms into unseen light? His shocking theories on otherworldly vibrations and the conscious universe were suppressed. Until now. What Tesla saw will electrify your understanding of reality. Dare to listen. The legacy of Nikola Tesla, that titan of electrical invention and visionary futurist, has long been shrouded in a mixture of awe, misunderstanding, and deliberate obfuscation. While the world eventually embraced his alternating current, his more radical theories on universal energy, wireless power transmission on a global scale, and even communication with unseen realms were often dismissed. His funding cut, his laboratories shuttered. For decades after his solitary death in room 3327 of the Hotel New Yorker in 1943, many of his papers, notes, and experimental logs were seized by U.S. government agencies, ostensibly for national security reasons, fueling endless speculation about what revolutionary, perhaps even dangerous, knowledge might have been suppressed. It was within this climate of lingering mystery that a young, tenacious historian of science and electrical engineering, Dr. Aris Thorne, the same scholar who later uncovered pivotal hidden texts of other great minds, embarked on a painstaking, decade-long quest. Her focus: Tesla's last decade, a period of reclusion, intense private contemplation, and rumored philosophical breakthroughs that never saw public light. Following faint trails in declassified FBI summaries and obscure journalistic footnotes from the late 1930s, Dr. Thorne was led not to a government vault, but to the dusty, forgotten archives of a defunct New York City newspaper, The Electric Age. There, amongst decaying newsprint and forgotten photographic plates, she found a series of typed interview transcripts accompanied by several fragile wax cylinder recordings. They were attributed to a little-known journalist named Julian West, who had apparently been granted a series of extraordinary late-night audiences with the aging Tesla between 1938 and 1941. The transcripts marked "Hold for Release, NT Personal Directive, Do Not Publish Before 2043. Detailed conversations so far outside the accepted scientific and philosophical paradigms of the time that their suppression seemed almost inevitable. Here was Tesla, not just the inventor, but the seer, laying bare his most profound and, until now, entirely unknown visions of consciousness as a cosmic frequency, death as a mere change in resonance, and the soul's energetic persistence in a universe vibrant with unseen forces. This was not just an interview. It was a transmission from a mind that had tuned into the very heartbeat of existence. A message banned for nearly a century by its sheer electrifying audacity. Julian West, in his meticulously typed preamble to the transcripts, describes the almost surreal experience of gaining access to Nikola Tesla in his later years. The once celebrated inventor, the electric magus who had illuminated worlds and dreamed of boundless free energy, was then a spectral figure, living a Spartan, eccentric existence in his suite at the Hotel New Yorker. West, a young journalist with a keen interest in the philosophical implications of science, had pursued the interview relentlessly, driven by a conviction that Tesla's most profound insights remained unspoken. After months of polite but firm rebuffs, a handwritten note penned in Tesla's elegant spidery script finally granted him an evening audience. The air in room 3327, West wrote, crackled with an almost palpable energy, though the only visible light came from a shaded desk lamp illuminating piles of books and schematics. Tesla himself, tall and gaunt, his eyes burning with an intensity that belied his age and evident frailty, received me with a grave courtesy. He moved with a precise, almost ritualistic economy of motion, his long fingers gesturing occasionally as he spoke, his voice a soft, cultured baritone with the distinct inflections of his Serbian homeland. West had prepared a list of questions about Tesla's current projects, his views on the escalating world crisis. It was the late 1930s, but he sensed an opening for something deeper. "Maestro Tesla," West began, his own voice, he admits, tinged with awe. "The world knows you for the light you brought, for the currents that now power our cities. But those of us who have followed your work more closely sense that your explorations have always reached beyond the purely mechanical into the very nature of energy, of life itself. Have your decades of communion with the unseen forces of electricity granted you any insights into the deeper mysteries, into what lies beyond our immediate perception, perhaps even beyond death?" Tesla was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the city lights twinkling far below his 33rd floor window. West noted, it was the gaze of a man accustomed to seeing what others could not, a man who lived on the very frontier of human understanding. Finally, Tesla turned, a faint, enigmatic smile touching his lips. "My dear Mr. West," he said, his voice resonating with a quiet power, "you ask not about dynamos and coils, but about the very current of existence. Very well. For too long, perhaps, I have spoken only in the language of amperes and volts, lest the world deem me madder than they already do." He gestured to a chair. "The universe, you see, is a symphony of vibrations. All that we perceive as matter, as solid reality, is but energy condensed into a slower vibration, a pattern held in temporary coherence. And what is consciousness? What is thought? What is the very spark of life, if not a vibration of an infinitely more subtle, more refined order, a resonance within the cosmic field?" He paused, his eyes seeming to pierce through West. "You ask about death. To the conventional mind, it is an ending, a cessation, darkness. But if all is vibration, Mr. West, can a vibration truly be annihilated? Or does it merely change its frequency, its mode of expression, perhaps becoming attuned to a different octave of reality, a spectrum of being currently imperceptible to our limited senses?" The air in the room seemed to hum with the implications of his words, and Julian West knew he was on the threshold of a conversation unlike any he had ever imagined. Julian West, in his transcribed notes, captures the essence of Tesla's cosmology with a sense of mounting intellectual excitement. The inventor, once he opened the channels of his more philosophical thought, spoke with a fervent, almost poetic intensity, his scientific precision now applied to the grandest, most elusive questions of existence. "You must understand, Mr. West," Tesla explained, his long, expressive fingers tracing patterns in the air, as if conducting an invisible orchestra, "that the universe is not a collection of dead, disparate objects, but a single, living, vibrating entity. Every star, every planet, every atom, every living cell, indeed, every thought, resonates at its own particular frequency, contributing its unique note to the cosmic symphony." He leaned forward, his eyes burning with a conviction that was almost hypnotic. "For decades, I have worked to harness the grosser vibrations, the electrical currents that can power cities and transmit signals across continents. But these are merely the lower octaves, the more obvious manifestations of a universal energy field that permeates all things, an ether, if you will, though not the static ether of 19th-century physics, but a dynamic, vibrant medium, alive with potential. West, struggling to keep pace with the torrent of visionary ideas, interjected, "And consciousness, maestro? Where does human consciousness, the individual mind, fit into this symphony of frequencies?" Tesla's expression softened, a look of profound contemplation settling on his features. "Ah, consciousness," he mused. "That is the most refined, the most exquisitely tuned frequency of all. It is not, as some materialists would have it, a mere byproduct of chemical reactions in the brain, an accidental epiphenomenon. Number the brain is the receiver, Mr. West, a marvelously complex biological resonator, specifically designed, or rather, evolved, to capture and express a particular bandwidth of this universal consciousness. Each individual mind is like a unique radio receiver, tuned to its own specific station within the cosmic broadcast." He continued, drawing an analogy from his own groundbreaking work in wireless communication. "When I first transmitted signals wirelessly across distances, many deemed it impossible. Sorcery, even. They could not see the waves, they could not touch them, yet the effect was undeniable. So it is with consciousness. Its deepest nature is not material, but vibrational. It is a pattern of energy, a specific resonance that interacts with and animates the physical form, the personality, the memories, the sense of I. These are the complex modulations of that core frequency, shaped by experience, by environment, by the unique tuning of the individual receiver." West noted, "He spoke with such conviction, such lucid detail, that the concept of consciousness as a resonant frequency, an individualized expression of a universal field, seemed not just plausible, but almost self-evident, a natural extension of the very laws of electricity and vibration he had mastered." The implications were clear. If consciousness was fundamentally a frequency, a pattern of energy, then its fate might be very different from that of the perishable physical body it inhabited. Julian West, in his chronicle of these extraordinary conversations, recounts how Nikola Tesla then addressed the ultimate question of death, not as a cessation, but as a profound alteration in the individual's resonant frequency within the universal energy field. If life and consciousness are, at their core, specific vibrations, specific frequencies, Tesla proposed, his voice taking on a calm, almost analytical tone, as if describing a predictable phenomenon in one of his electrical experiments. "Then what is physical death, Mr. West? Is it the extinguishment of the flame? Or is it, rather, a detuning, a decoherence of that specific conscious frequency from the biological resonator, the body, which can no longer sustain its particular vibration?" He gestured towards the window, where the myriad lights of New York City pulsed in the winter night. "Each of those lights," he said, "represents a flow of electrical energy, vibrating at a precise frequency to produce illumination. If the filament in a bulb breaks, if the connection is severed, the light in that particular bulb ceases. The bulb is dead to that specific manifestation of light. But has the electrical energy in the city's grid vanished? Has the potential for light been annihilated? Number the energy is still there. The laws that allow for illumination are still intact. It is merely that one particular receiver, one particular point of expression, has ceased to function in that specific way." West, deeply engrossed, asked, "So, you are suggesting, maestro, that the conscious energy, the frequency of the soul, as you might term it, is not destroyed at death, but merely changes its state, its mode of expression?" Tesla nodded slowly, his gaze intense. "Precisely. Energy, as I have always maintained, and as your own science is beginning to affirm more deeply, cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be transformed. Why should the most refined, most complex form of energy we know, the energy of a thinking, feeling, creating consciousness, be the sole exception to this universal law? It is illogical. It is inelegant from the perspective of cosmic design. He continued, painting a picture with his words. When the physical body, the biological resonator, can no longer sustain the specific frequency of individual consciousness due to illness, age, or injury, that conscious energy does not simply wink out of existence. It is released from its confinement within that particular material structure. It is detuned, as it were, from the gross physical plane. But it does not cease to vibrate. It merely shifts its resonance. It may become attuned to other octaves of existence, other dimensions of the universal energy field that are not normally perceptible to us while we are focused through the narrow bandwidth of our physical senses. West wrote, "He spoke of this not with the certainty of religious dogma, but with the confident intuition of a physicist who had spent a lifetime perceiving the underlying unity and continuity of energetic phenomena. Death, in Tesla's vision, was not an abyss of nothingness, but a transition point, a change in the universe's grand vibrational symphony. The end of one melody, perhaps, but not the end of the music, nor of the musician." Julian West, emboldened by Tesla's radical reframing of death as a vibrational shift, pressed the inventor on the crucial question of individual persistence. If conscious energy is released, does any aspect of the unique self, its memories, its personality, endure this transformation? "Maestro," West inquired, his voice earnest, "if our consciousness is a frequency that changes its resonance at death, what becomes of the individual, the Nikola Tesla, or the Julian West, with all his accumulated experiences, his loves, his knowledge? Is that unique pattern, that specific song of the soul, preserved in any recognizable form, or does it simply dissolve into an undifferentiated universal hum?" Tesla paused, his brow furrowed in deep thought, his long fingers steepled before him. "A most pertinent question, Mr. West," he finally responded. "The crude ego, the personality as defined by its earthly attachments and transient desires, that is undoubtedly a construct of the physical brain and its interaction with the environment. And much of that superficial structure, like the scaffolding of a building, may indeed fall away when the physical form that supported it is gone." He then leaned forward, a spark of his visionary intensity returning to his eyes. "However, consider the nature of information itself, especially when impressed upon an energetic field. In my wireless experiments, I learned that a complex signal, a specific pattern of oscillations, can be transmitted across vast distances, carried upon an etheric medium, and then be reconstituted, its information intact, by a properly tuned receiver. The initial transmitting apparatus may be dismantled, but the signal, the pattern once launched, has its own existence, its own potential for remanifestation." He gestured around his hotel room, filled with invisible radio waves from countless broadcasts. "This room," he said, "is alive with unseen patterns of information, music, voices. They are here, always. They require only the correct instrument, correctly tuned, to become perceptible. What if the sum total of a life's experiences, the deep learning, the core identity, the achieved level of conscious awareness, what if this creates an etheric echo, a complex vibrational signature, an informational pattern of profound coherence, imprinted upon the universal energy field?" West noted that Tesla seemed to be formulating these thoughts as he spoke, his mind working like one of his own intricate coils, gathering and concentrating unseen energies into a focused idea. "This etheric blueprint, as one might call it," Tesla continued, This unique resonance pattern of a developed soul may not be so easily dissipated. It may retain its coherence, its informational integrity, even after its separation from the physical resonator. It might persist as a focused eddy in the cosmic current, a self-aware pattern of energy. He added, with a cautious yet hopeful inflection, perhaps it is this persistent, informational essence, this refined vibrational signature that constitutes the true immortal mind I have sometimes spoken of. Not a ghostly replica of the earthly personality, but the distilled wisdom and unique resonance of a conscious journey through experience. The implication was that individuality, in its most essential, informational sense, might indeed perdure, awaiting new possibilities of expression or resonance within the vast, interconnected web of universal energy. Nikola Tesla's vision, as revealed in the long-suppressed dialogues with Julian West, extended beyond the fate of individual consciousness to encompass the nature of the universe itself as a vast, intelligent, and energetic system, a cosmic dynamo, as West noted Tesla metaphorically termed it. He saw individual minds not as isolated islands of awareness, but as intimately connected to, and expressions of, this all-pervading universal mind. My work with alternating currents and resonant frequencies, Tesla explained one evening, his voice imbued with a quiet fervor, taught me that energy is most effectively transmitted and utilized when systems are in tune, when they resonate sympathetically with the source. This is true for electrical machines. I believe it is equally true for consciousness. He paused, his gaze inward. There is, I am convinced, a primary, fundamental source of all energy and all consciousness in the universe. Call it the central sun, the great ineffable, the universal mind. The name matters little. It is the ultimate dynamo from which all else emanates, and to which all ultimately returns. West then asked, and human consciousness, Maestro? How do we, as individuals, relate to this universal mind? Tesla's response was direct. We are not separate from it, Mr. West. We are it, in miniature. Each human mind, indeed each sentient being, is a localized resonator, a temporary focal point, drawing its essential spark of awareness from this infinite reservoir. Our capacity for thought, for invention, for love, for perceiving beauty, these are not generated ex nihilo by our physical brains alone. The brain is the transducer, the magnificent biological instrument that steps down, as it were, the incredibly high frequencies of the universal mind into a range that can be experienced and expressed within the physical realm. He compared it to his vision for global wireless power. I dreamed of tapping the ambient energy of the Earth itself, of providing free, limitless power to all humanity, by attuning our devices to the planet's natural resonances. In a similar way, I believe the human mind, when properly attuned through discipline, through purity of thought, through selfless aspiration, can tap more directly into the wisdom and power of this universal mind. He lamented the state of humanity, so often out of tune with these deeper realities. We live on the surface, he said, a note of sadness in his voice, concerned with the gross manifestations of power, with material gain, with conflict and division. We have forgotten how to listen to the subtle frequencies, how to resonate with the underlying harmony of the cosmos. Our science itself, for all its marvels, too often focuses on dissecting the dead machine, rather than understanding the living current that animates it. Yet, his vision was ultimately hopeful. But the potential is there, within each soul, he affirmed. The capacity to become a clearer channel, a more perfect resonator, for the light and intelligence of the universal mind. This, to me, is the true path of human evolution. not merely technological advancement, but a conscious spiritual attunement. And death, in this context, might be seen as the individual resonator, its specific task complete, returning its accumulated understanding, its unique harmonies, back to the great cosmic dynamo, contributing to its eternal creative unfolding. Julian West wrote that listening to Tesla speak of these things was like witnessing a prophet of a new scientific spirituality, one where the laws of electricity and vibration became keys to unlocking the deepest secrets of the soul and its connection to the divine. Julian West, in his later reflections appended to the interview transcripts, grappled with the question of why Nikola Tesla, a man who possessed such a revolutionary and ultimately hopeful vision of existence, chose to keep these profound philosophical insights largely private, confining them to these rare, late-night conversations and, presumably, his most personal, now lost or suppressed, notebooks. The answer, West concluded, was as complex as Tesla himself, rooted in the scientific, industrial, and societal dogmas of his time, and in Tesla's own painful experiences with a world often unprepared for the sheer scale of his genius. The maestro, West wrote, was no stranger to ridicule and opposition. His advocacy for alternating current faced a brutal war from powerful vested interests. His dreams of global wireless power, a gift of free energy for all humanity, were systematically starved of funding by financiers who saw no profit in a resource that could not be metered and controlled. In one particularly candid exchange, Tesla himself touched upon this, his voice, according to West's notes, tinged with a weary resignation, but also an unbroken spirit. "Mr. West," Tesla stated, looking out at the Manhattan skyline he had helped to electrify, "the human mind, particularly the collective mind of an established order, is often like a poorly tuned receiving circuit. It is receptive only to frequencies that match its existing configuration, its ingrained beliefs. Introduce a signal that is too novel, too far outside its narrow bandwidth of acceptance, and it will either fail to register it at all, or it will react with dissonance, with fear, even with hostility." He continued, "My scientific work, even that which was demonstrably practical, often met with such resistance. Imagine, then, the reception for ideas that attempt to bridge the chasm between what we call matter and what humanity has vaguely termed spirit, between the laws of electricity and the potential continuity of consciousness itself." Tesla spoke of the dogma of darkness, not a religious darkness, but the darkness of a limited, purely materialistic worldview that had come to dominate much of scientific thought. Science, in its noble quest for objectivity, he explained, has too often thrown the baby out with the bathwater. In rightly rejecting superstition and unprovable religious doctrines, it has also, at times, closed its mind to the possibility of subtler energies, of dimensions of reality that lie beyond our current instruments and equations. To speak of consciousness as a fundamental frequency, of the soul as an energetic pattern that might persist beyond physical death, this, in the eyes of many of my contemporaries, would be to abandon science for mysticism, to trade reason for fantasy. He also hinted at more pragmatic, even cynical reasons for suppression. "Consider Mr. West," he said, a wry smile playing on his lips. "If humanity truly understood that its consciousness is an immortal, energetic essence, part of a universal field, how might that change its priorities? Its fear of death, which is so often exploited? Its rapacious pursuit of material wealth? Its willingness to wage wars? Perhaps certain powers that thrive on fear, on division, on the illusion of ultimate annihilation, would not welcome such a liberating perspective." Julian West concluded that Tesla having fought and often lost battles against industrial and financial titans over his more tangible inventions, understood all too well that his most profound, most spiritually charged insights, if released prematurely, would face an even greater, perhaps insurmountable, wall of incomprehension and vested opposition. He chose, it seems, to encode his deepest vision in these private dialogues, a message in a bottle cast into the ocean of time, awaiting a future age capable of receiving its extraordinary signal. In the culminating phases of their dialogues, as recorded by Julian West, Nikola Tesla offered his most poetic and perhaps most hopeful vision of what lies beyond the threshold of physical death. He consistently returned to his core analogy of vibrations and frequencies, framing the afterlife not as a static place, but as a dynamic state of being, a shift into a different part of the vast electromagnetic and perhaps etheric spectrum of existence. Our physical senses, Mr. West, Tesla elaborated, his voice, though frail, resonating with conviction, are attuned to a very narrow band of this cosmic spectrum. We see a sliver of light. We hear a range of sounds. We perceive matter in its grosser, condensed forms. But what of the infinite octaves of vibration that lie above and below this limited range? What of the energies, the intelligences, the forms of existence that may be as real as ourselves, yet operate on frequencies currently imperceptible to our biological instruments? He gestured towards the city, now a sea of electric constellations against the night sky. Each of those lights, he said, is a different frequency, a different color. Some are brilliant and stark, others soft and diffuse. Imagine that consciousness, too, exists across such a spectrum. Our earthly life is but one color, one specific frequency band. When the physical resonator, the body, fails, the conscious energy is not extinguished. It is merely retuned. It shifts its dominant vibration, perhaps moving into a higher or finer part of the spectrum, a realm of light that our physical eyes cannot see, but which the inner essence, the soul, can perceive, and in which it can consciously exist. West noted, he spoke of this spectrum of being with the familiarity of an electrical engineer, discussing different wavelengths, yet with the visionary intensity of a seer. For him, there was no fundamental schism between the physical and the spiritual. They were all part of one continuous, vibrational reality. Tesla then offered a striking image, one that became the title of Julian West's suppressed manuscript. Death, he declared, his eyes seeming to gaze into a luminous distance, is not the darkness that so many fear. It is, rather, an intensity of light, a brilliance of being, that our current sensory apparatus is simply not designed to register. It is like stepping from a dimly lit room into the full blaze of the noon sun. A shock, a transformation, a dissolution of old forms, yes, but ultimately an immersion in a vaster, more radiant reality. The soul does not go into nothingness. It goes into moreness, into a higher octave of its own essential vibration. He spoke of this transition not with fear, but with a kind of scientific awe, as if contemplating the most fascinating experiment of all. The universe, he added, is filled with such unseen lights, such unheard music. Our task, both in life and perhaps beyond it, is to continually refine our own receiving apparatus, our own consciousness, to become attuned to ever higher, ever more subtle frequencies of truth, of beauty, of love. Julian West wrote that in those moments, Tesla seemed less like an aging inventor in a hotel room and more like a cosmic voyager, reporting back from the frontiers of existence, his words painting a picture of death not as an ending, but as an electrifying, luminous transfiguration. The final transcript of Julian West's dialogues with Nikola Tesla concludes with a poignant sense of urgency and a heavy burden of knowledge. Tesla, knowing his time was drawing short, and perhaps sensing the profound unreadiness of the world for his most radical visions, entrusted these conversations to West with a specific, almost solemn charge. These thoughts, Mr. West Tesla is recorded as saying, his voice a mere whisper, but his eyes still burning with their characteristic fire, are not for this immediate hour. Humanity is yet too young in its understanding, too enamored with the surface of things, too fearful of what lies beyond the narrow confines of its accepted dogmas. To release these ideas now, without the proper context, without a broader shift in consciousness, would be to cast pearls before those who would trample them in ignorance or twist them for their own purposes. He requested that West hold the record, to find a way to preserve it, until a time when science has grown bold enough to ask the truly fundamental questions about consciousness, and when spirituality has matured enough to embrace the language of energy and vibration without fear. Perhaps in a century, perhaps longer, a time will come when humanity is ready to tune into these frequencies. Julian West, as his later private notes reveal, was profoundly changed by these encounters. He describes feeling like the custodian of a sacred, almost dangerous truth. He made several discreet attempts in the years that followed to gauge the interest of certain philosophical societies or forward-thinking scientific journals, but met with polite dismissal or outright skepticism. The ideas were too far ahead, too. Tesla. He ultimately decided to honor the spirit of Tesla's request, carefully archiving the transcripts and wax cylinders, making provisions for their eventual rediscovery by a future generation. The maestro's vision, West wrote in a final undated addendum, is not a mere speculation. It is a challenge to see the universe not as a dead machine, but as a living, vibrant, conscious organism, and to understand our own lives and deaths as integral parts of its immense, eternal symphony. I have lived with these words for decades, and they have illuminated my own passage through time. My only hope is that, when they finally emerge, they will find minds and hearts ready to receive their transformative light. And so, for nearly a century, Tesla's most intimate thoughts on the ultimate nature of reality remained hidden, a silent testament in a forgotten archive. Their emergence now, facilitated by Dr. Aris Thorne's painstaking research into the peripheries of Tesla's documented life, comes at a time when the boundaries between physics, information theory, and consciousness studies are becoming increasingly porous. Banned for 100 years, Tesla's vision of death and the afterlife is more than a historical curiosity. It is an invitation from one of history's most electrifying minds to reconsider everything we thought we knew about who we are, why we are here, and what truly happens when the individual frequency we call a life changes its resonance and returns to the cosmic whole. The Wardenclyffe Tower may have crumbled, but Tesla's ultimate transmission, it seems, is only now beginning to be received.